everyone. We are about to get started. Hey everyone, thanks so much for joining us today. My name's Ann Howe, and I'm the Managing Director of Schumacher South. We're super excited about the conversation today, and we are so excited to have such amazing talent on our panel. We hope that you will all join us for a reception in the showroom following what I know will be a lovely discussion. Before they get started, I just want to take a quick moment to introduce our new brand director and moderator, Christie Tonnessen. Christie joined Schumacher in January and is definitely making waves. Join me in welcoming Christie, our fabulous panelists, and thank you all for being here. So without further ado, take it away.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for coming and for waiting for us to get started. I'm really excited for today's conversation. We're going to be talking all about mixing patterns, and we have the experts here to guide us through it. So without further ado, let's get started. We have Erika Ward, James Farmer, and Maggie Griffin. So first, let's just start by everyone telling us just a little bit about how they got into design and where they are today. So Erika, do you want to kick off?
Sure. I'm Erika Ward, and I started design from the building construction division. So I was managing large-scale construction budgets, think Georgia Aquarium, office buildings in Atlantic Station, and I also had design clients on this side on the consultancy level. And so then my business naturally evolved into full-service interior design, where I was able to leave corporate back in 2009, and I've been doing this ever since.
Amazing.
Thank you.
James?
I'm James Farmer, and I got started as a young kid, just rearranging my mother's living room or whatever I could do. And then we have a very similar, because we grew up together. And so my really start was hometown, small town, and that inspiration of how the generations did it before us. And then went to Auburn, where I studied art history and horticulture, a fun little combo. And so the garden and the interiors are my mix that I always am inspired by, those two.
Hey y'all, I'm Maggie Griffin. My story is like James too. I just grew up working with my mom and my grandmothers. We were rearranging their rooms a long time ago. And then when I went to Georgia, I graduated with my degree in furnishings and interiors. And then I was working in high-end interiors boutique. And so I kind of gleaned my first clients from our customers there. And then, of course, word of mouth. And I've had Maggie Griffin Design since 2009. And we've grown to a team of 12. So we handle full-scale residential design kind of all over the country.
I love that. So truly 3 experts to help us guide us through mixing patterns. So no better place to start than by asking, how do you approach mixing patterns? So if you're approaching it with a certain strategy, do you go by color or scale? What's the best way to start? Let's go first.
I'll jump in. As I remember something, one of my favorite design professors told me. She said there was this old school like trio where you had a solid, a plaid, a floral, or it was a solid, a plaid, and an animal print. And I kept thinking, what if we take the solid out and add a stripe? You know, that's like a whole nother. And so, what's your solid? Like, what's your base to start from? And so I think when you marry it, you know, it's congruent and it has that confidence the way you present it. So rather than sheepishly saying, I'm going to mix, you know, a cheetah with plaid, do it. And it's that confidence kind of comes through with it. So the inspiration for me, there is some formula, you know, to it, but it's not so much that I think, oh, well, I've used 40% cheetah, so it's time to
40% plus 20%.
It's something if you really want to be formulaic about it, you can think about it that way. But it really comes down to how it relays and relates to one another, and it has to balance. You know, do y'all just feel it in your gut? You're like, okay, this works.
Yeah, I think I start from the room more so than I do like putting the palette together and just kind of thinking about if the room lacks architectural detail, what can I do to make it come alive? And sometimes it'll start with a floral pattern on the drape or some funky abstract or whatever it is. And then, or I may think about a piece of furniture that I might want to bring to life if we have to reupholster it or something like that. But going back to what you were saying, it's just kind of seeing what works, trial and error, not so much trial and error, but like thinking about where you want to start first and then layering on that.
The layers, yeah.
I think so too, and I also, when we're meeting with our clients for the first time, I'm just kind of taking cues from them during that entire meeting, and we all know there's no shortage of images these days. They're everywhere. And so 9 times out of 10, a client is going to show you something that they love and say, oh, I love this room you did, or I found this in a shelter magazine the other day. And so those cues, you can start building from there. And I happen to like a similar formula to James. I love a large scale floral, I love a block print, but then that needs to be balanced with the right things. Maybe it is a solid in the room, or maybe it's a small gingham check, or maybe you can go bigger on a check or a window pane. So I think it's about kind of taking the cues, and it depends on each room in the house. You're not going to probably put as many patterns in a bedroom as you would in maybe your main living space. And then maybe if you have a white kitchen, that's where you make a really large scale pattern shine with room and shade. So just kind of taking those cues along the way. And I think it's also heavily architecture dependent on the house. So if you have a very specific architectural style, if it's a cottage, if it's a Tudor, if it's a Georgian, you can kind of keep going from there and direct your clients too.
So speaking of the clients, if you have a client that's really wanting to go like crazy with prints and it's just too much, or vice versa, it's like not enough, someone just only likes solids, how do you help kind of like persuade and guide them into a direction that you think would be better ultimately? It's a tough balancing act.
It is.
Well, I typically ask, oh, I'm sorry, we're
Yeah,
gonna
go.
No, I typically ask the client, like, well, how do you want to feel in the room? And then based on their response, then I will give my interpretation of what that is, just kind of set it out there, and then just kind of, it's a collaborative effort, you know what I mean? And like Maggie said, they'll have no shortage of images sometimes, or sometimes they come with nothing, and that's most times for me. And so what I have to do is ask a ton of questions, assess the home, and then decide what I think is best, and then hand that over. Because when somebody hands you a scheme, even if you had no idea what you want, the minute they hand it to you, you can instantly decide what you like and what you don't like. You get what I mean? Yeah.
I also love to think about that I am solving some psychological issue, but really, because there's a reason why you can't decide what color to paint your living room.
Right.
So you hire someone.
Yeah, let's
and
dig
it's-
deeper.
And so but what is it? And so if someone is really they're really wanting lots and lots of prints and patterns and mix, or they really just want, navy and white and very, very kind of clean and more blocked, it's figuring out what that is. And one of the crazy questions I often ask my clients is, do you do your own taxes?
Oh.
And the reason I asked that is, and 99% of the time I said, no, I hired an accountant. I said, so, all right, you've hired me. And so it's that I now can interpret whether tax law or design law and apply it.
I love that.
But there's something to that, because
Yeah, it's a great point.
You are really having to interpret what is in front of you. So if you have a client who truly wants something wild and fun, it's well, you got to remember that you're going to look at that room at 7 a.m. when you wake up, and maybe that's not what you need. So it's figuring out the psychological. There's truly a major part of that of what we do.
That's good.
Absolutely. I feel like too, I love a client who has an open mind. If you have an open mind and you're willing to listen, I think that's so important, and to be a good client. But it also can be quite exhausting to try to convince someone of these things. But I also feel like if you can kind of show them a picture, okay, maybe you're really timid about using this really colorful floral right now, but let me show you how it's utilized in a room we've done before, or something very similar, and then they can kind of get it. And like Erika said, it is just kind of how you feel in the room. So you might be able to hold up a swatch of fabric and they're trying to visualize this as drapery, but when you get the rug down and the lamps and the shades and all the other beautiful components of the room, I think that they can just kind of absorb that a little bit better.
Yeah.
But I always tell my clients too, don't react right away, take a minute, and 9 times out of 10, if it's something they give me a little bit of pushback on in the beginning, but go with, it's one of their favorite things.
Exactly, agreed.
I love that. And I think that that's so true. Like, there's so many layers to the design process, but sometimes when people are just looking at everything, they're like having a bold opinion, but you're like, no, but this is layering in a way that you're really gonna love. Like, trust me, let me do your taxes kind of thing. So how has your approach to mixing patterns changed over your career? Like, did you go really big in the beginning into it and then kind of like tailor back, or vice versa, or would you never approach that and now you do?
The things I'm drawn to, I've always been drawn to. It's the things that I grew up around, but I feel like certainly post-pandemic, my clients seem to be gravitating towards more pattern, more color, more exciting. We spent a lot of time, on the kind of the farmhouse trend that everyone was wanting to kind of stay a little bit more neutral. And now I think we all want to be inspired and invigorated in our homes. So I'm grateful for that. And so I think that they just come to us with more of an open mind from the get-go, just kind of post the past 2.5 weird years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Brighten them up.
Yes.
I mean, just flipping through and like seeing images of our work, I can tell you the Schumacher pattern in each room that we've used. And like, for example, Citrus Garden is definitely a darling of Schumacher's collection. And we've all used it in every colorway, but it's not new. It's been around over 100 years. So that approach to pattern and mixing it, you can take that and it's great with cheetah, plaid, stripes, solids. And so you find these workhorses of the design library. There's Zanzibar right there.
Imperial trellis.
Imperial trellis, and you can take them, and it looks great today as it does, 50 years ago.
I realize just how much I use imperial trellis now.
Yeah, how much we use it, and I guarantee you, we all have like our top 3 that we like use and go to. There's something about using that classic one and then how you interpret it each time.
Yeah.
I actually had a client, she was the one that kind of pushed for more pattern and color, and it wasn't by her request, it was just by her possessions. So she had a lot of antique furnishings that she had inherited from her mother, and she had a really young family, so you had all of these very upright kind of formal antiques, and you really needed to inject something fun. And so I came up with these fun fabric schemes, and she loved them. And so we ended up putting bold prints on chairs and on windows and the Roman shades, and it really helped to breathe like a fresh breath of air into these antiques that she had owned and she was not parting with. And for no reason should you have to part with them if they lasted 100 years, and they're gonna last another 100.
Yeah, I love it.
I can't say it was quite 100 years, but they're like older pieces. But it really helped to make, just as James' work, but it's very similar to the type of style that we ended up with when it was all said and done. And so I was really proud of that and did more of that, as time went on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So fun. So James mentioned this a little bit, but I just want to dig a little bit into, if you are mixing patterns, do you have like go-tos of what mixes really well together? And if you do have some Schumacher favorites, definitely let us know.
I love, one of the things that I think Schumacher does so well are the recoloring of their iconic block prints. And to me, I think that's a really fun way too, so that we aren't using the exact same thing for our go-tos for every project, is we can say, okay, maybe we use this color of Persian Lancer this time, or this colorway of Pearl River, or some of our favorites. And certainly, I love all of the florals. I love to mix a check of varying sizes with florals. I think those always look really great together. If it's a more handsome block print, a stripe or a window pane, maybe more appropriate. But also a healthy balance of some really bold, I love jewel tones in solids. I love a wool for a drapery, can be just the right thing in a study, or, but Schumacher, the lattice patterns, the Zanzibar trellis, all of those are such good mixes. So like James was saying with the Citrus Garden, that looks so good with that trellis pattern, but maybe it's just the different colorways and how you mix that.
I love Lotus Garden There's so many great colorways, but I think very seasonally. And so if I'm thinking, okay, well, how is this room being used? If it's a gentleman's study and we're going to use the, it's the rustier colorway. It's more of like a mandarin orangey, and it has those rust and handsome colors. But then the celadon colorway, it's cheery. And so you think, well, is this a morning room and receives this light? Is it a room that's fireplace driven and by the season? So, well, yeah, there it is. There it is on the windows and pillows there. And then also too, like I think about like growing up, my mother had clipper ships in my room, and it was in this sand colorway, and it used to be on a polished cotton, and now it may be discontinued now. Y'all can let me know, but it was on a linen, and so that approach of how things went differently. So how it would have been a polished cotton and kind of a fixed, tighter valance is then more of a relaxed panel. And so, yeah, I could still have a themed bedroom and like it. But you have those iconic patterns, and you really gravitate towards them, and they become your total inspiration board for the whole room, and then everything can weave through that pattern.
And that's a great tip for mixing in general, is if you have a strong pattern that you're really inspired by, letting that help direct your design for the whole space.
It's your lead fabric.
Yes.
Lead fabric, yeah.
Okay. Do you have some favorite?
Oh,
combos?
no, I love a bold floral, any large bloom, large scenes, and I love the fact that with Schumacher you can isolate the bloom, in one job, like on pillows, and then you can isolate another section of the same fabric for Roman shades, and it has a completely different look. And as James was saying, with the different backgrounds and the colorways, I can take something that's a lighter floral, but then on another project I had it was a dark background on a bold floral. And they tend to feel a little bit more modern to me. And if you kind of pair it with a geometric or some type of transitional furnishing, I think it tends to go over better with a client that really doesn't have the traditional aesthetic on their radar. And I think it's both timeless and classic. And like you said, you're going to wake up every day and either walk past your dining room or walk into the dining room from your front door, and you really want to love what you see, and you still want to be excited about it. Schumacher prints are not inexpensive, so you want to make sure that they get what they want, and they're going to continue to love it for years to come. So,
Yeah. Expensive but worth it.
They last.
Totally. Absolutely.
Yeah, they last.
Just keeping it real.
So you both kind of just mentioned this, but there's some rooms that really lend themselves to mixing a lot of different patterns, and some where maybe it's better to be a little bit more neutral perhaps with your patterns. Which rooms do you think are like, this is a room that I definitely want to mix patterns with? Like types of rooms, like bedrooms, kitchens, living rooms, etc.
I think the living spaces for sure are places where you can layer more, because it's more about the gathering, the warmth, kind of living in those rooms. If you have a big living room where you have multiple seating areas too, those kind of need to feel special in their own way. So maybe you have a big rug, say a natural fiber or a jute, but then you're kind of defining those spaces with different layer rugs.
Yeah, I love
and then
that.
the fabrics that coordinate with each other, maybe you use the check on the drapery and kind of over near the window, but across the room you kind of pull that check in over into pillows. So I think that that's a great way. And I was thinking about Quail Meadow is one of the fabrics too. And it is named after seasons, the colorways are. And I think Quail Meadow is one of my favorites, just having grown up, with a dad and brothers that hunt, and just kind of like, I love that mentality of using that beautiful animal, but also it can be really feminine. If you choose the lighter colorway, you can kind of play up on those feminine tones too. So I think in a larger family space, a den, I love layering in fabrics there, but in a bedroom, you may just want to scale back just a little to create more of a soothing atmosphere.
And you think about the room's purpose. So if it's a dining room, there's a formula. You have to have a table, you have to have a chair, a serving piece. So often the walls are, the floor space is taken up with the furniture. And so your walls that you're left with, if I'm eating Thanksgiving, I may not be looking at citrus or won't, so I feel like orange juice is breakfast, so citrus garden and breakfast room. It makes sense in that respect. It may make no sense whatsoever, but for some reason it does.
Yeah.
So I love bedrooms and dining rooms to be a touch more soothing, just because it's the first thing that you see and in the morning, but the last thing at night. So I tend to be a little more relaxed in the bedrooms. And then for the dining room, I love that real estate's taken up by the table and the chair, but then that little bit of wall that you have, I think that's where like the Ixel papers and like the scenics really have, I was in England this fall, and every dining room was a scenic,
Right.
in these grand country estates, and then you come over here, it's kind of the same tradition. So it's fun to see how it gets interpreted, on either side of the pond, but also, through the decades. So, but I love any excuse to kind of go, a little bit fun, and often it's the ceiling. We just did a ceiling in the, it's like the tortoise shell. It has like a little sheen to it, to the paper. And, when we showed our client that, she said, "Oh, is this the wallpaper?" And I said, "No, it's the ceiling paper."
Close. Fifth
And
wall.
She never thought about it, but it's the fifth wall.
Yeah.
And so powder rooms are great places for that too. Everyone comes over and sees
Right.
that part when you're having a party. So.
So fun.
Yeah. So just kind of, for dining rooms, for me, it's like dramatic.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I'd rather
Love that.
go dramatic for a dining room. Definitely always pitching wallpaper for the ceiling. I'm at least going to try. But you think about the hard surfaces, your table chairs, your buffet or china cabinet. It's kitchens. That's also a fun place to see how far you can push color and pattern in fabrics in kitchens, and of course performance if you have it on the seats, obviously. And being able to also pair some of those patterns you may have on a Roman shade, and it has it pair it with adjacent tile patterns. And so thinking about your tile is another pattern. It may not be a fabric, but it still plays with the entire scheme in a place like a kitchen or a bathroom. So I like the challenge of like using patterns and colors in like a hard surface area that you wouldn't typically think of.
Yeah, but it definitely counts as patterns, right?
Totally.
All folds together. So in that same vein, if you're scheming a room and there's just a little too much going on, there's just like one too many patterns, or just something's a little off, how do you approach simplifying a little bit but keeping that like strong mix of patterns goal that you had?
Solids for sure. But also don't forget about leather. I think there's so many pretty leather colors out there and choices, and even the faux leathers I think can balance, an ottoman or a secondary piece of furniture, bar stool seats. So there's so many cool ways to also bring in a little bit of pattern with even a solid that's a strié. Like you have the strié velvet with Schumacher, that's still stripe, but it does read as more of a solid in the room. So that can be a great balance too. And for clients who are insistent on using, okay, we love everything here, then it's about finding that delicate balance of what goes on the drape, but what is in small. What do we get a little punch of in the middle of the sofa versus recovering the whole chair.
Right.
And it's picking, a favorite. I know it can be tough, but it's an investment. And so what do you want that dollar to really go towards? And often if it's a room where we've proposed a lot and the client has asked to dial back, or often it's us that looks back and says, okay, we could take one of these out.
Yeah.
You have to think of the other approach. Is it the chair bottom on the dining room chair, but it spends 90% of its time under a table? Is it a lampshade? Is it something that it's a really wild floral, but once it's sheared, it takes on a different pattern on that lampshade. So for me, dialing it back is thinking of the application and where will it be. And then if I'm forced, I'll use a solid. But I'll still pipe it. Have that contrasting welt in there somewhere.
Yeah. When talking about kind of balance and pattern and color, I think about a palette cleanser, like my outfit. And so we took a picture earlier, and all the Schumacher ladies have on these bold florals, and I'm like, I'm the palette cleanser today. And so I think
You look great.
Thank you. And so I think it helps clients to understand why we need to balance a little bit. And I think about like even perfumes, I love perfumes too, and just even that what is it, coffee beans you smell, just to kind of. But the palette cleanser helps you to appreciate all the other patterns and colors in the room, because if they're all fighting for attention, then it was like, what's the point? You can't look at any of it because it's just so overwhelming.
It's too much, yeah.
It's too much, yeah.
So for someone that's maybe getting into design and wanting to try this specific look for the first time, what tips would you have for how they approach it? Or what's maybe like an easy way to get into experimenting with this? Like maybe you really like solids and you're gonna try to go for it a little. Like what's an easier way to get into the trend without making it as much of a commitment?
Start small. Start
Like an
small
animal
because it
print.
can be quite expensive to redo. I would not just, invest in drapery if you're just starting out. But also wallpaper is such a fun way, and there's some small little nooks and crannies in all of our houses that can handle a big pattern if you're just sort of getting a toe wet. But definitely start small. Pillows are a great place to start.
Also because then they're interchangeable and you can move them around and bring patterns to other places in your house too.
Yes.
Think about it too with your artwork. So if it's not so much as fabric, wall covering, ceiling treatment sort of thing, it's if you're really worried about that jump, that leap from solid to patterns, gravitate towards maybe whether it's 6 botanical prints and they create a grid, and
Yeah.
that grid's and if that gets too much for you, then maybe you move those up a stairwell or down a hallway. Remember, it's okay to put holes in walls. We like to charge our clients a lot of money for the wallpaper, and then we put holes in it, and that's just what we do. But but what I recommend is that sometimes it's not just that back to that formula of here's this pattern, this pattern, this pattern building up. It can come in different forms, and so the artwork may be that, and if you're comfortable with that, maybe it's the top of a grass cloth, so it's texture, visual pattern. That's not as busy as something that's like geometric.
Yeah, but that's a great point also to implement different textures into it to kind of get more of that layering look without going as bold with patterns.
Sure.
I just say rip the Band-Aid off and just go
Good.
for it.
Okay.
Go do it.
Thank you. You said what I wanted to say.
Yeah. I mean, just pick one thing, and I would go for the drapes, or I would go for the upholstered chair, because I pitch it to my clients as before they even give me the objection. I'm like, this is my wild card. There, like I already know it's bold. I already know you're gonna fuss, but listen, there's
Well, they
some.
hired you.
Yeah, so they're like, I'm gonna trust you. Like that means I better like it, And I put my neck on the line, and you're gonna love it. And most times, all the times they have. And I even said, if you don't like it, I'll buy it back. And they've never asked me to buy it back. So, and I say that because I would have loved it myself. So I don't sell my clients anything that I wouldn't love.
Yeah.
I wouldn't know where to put it. My husband's here. I don't know where to put everything, but I would get it back or put it in the showroom.
It's like nodding.
He's like, yeah.
Full house.
Yeah. And then I'll use my home as a laboratory,
Yeah.
And I'll use color on chairs. And I first started with color, really bold color. And I took a pair of English roll arm chairs and put like a bright yellow linen on it. And they were like my favorite thing. And I can show clients my own home so they can see I practice what I preach. This is what I do. This is what I did in my home. And they're like, okay, well, they either like it or they don't, right? But then they'll see that I actually am doing what I'm trying to do in their home, in my own home.
Yeah.
And I live with it every day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's a great point. So I have one more question, but start thinking of your questions for the panel, because then I'd love to open it up to all of you to ask about what you guys would love to know for mixing patterns. One question that I had was, if you live in an apartment and you're not going to be there forever and you are trying to get your security deposit back at the end,
Yeah.
right? Without going through dramatic measures. What are some ways to achieve this? Like if your walls have to just be a solid color and maybe you don't want to invest in expensive custom drapes, what are some ways to kind of get this look and have it feel like a cohesive mix of patterns?
Well, no, let's go ahead and do the drapes, and I'll tell you why.
Okay.
Because I have the same thing with clients that move a lot. They may not be an apartment, but I have clients that move a lot. So we'll take drapes that we would have made for them, and I would either turn them to pillows, a bed scarf. I've even taken them and add color blocking at the top or the bottom.
Yeah, those are
I've
great.
even turned them into Roman shades. So I'm like, right now it's drapes, but they're fabric. Like we can do anything that you can do with fabric.
Yeah, that's so true.
Yeah, and so it depends, of course, of how long you're going to be there, and really how tall or how short the windows are would really determine how you can repurpose them later on. But, because if you're going to be there for an apartment a year or 2 years. I just want you to be happy. However long you're going to be there, like, let's do it, and we'll figure it out later.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I love that. I'm going to say that in my head when I want to justify a good purchase.
Just call me. I'll help you with that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Give me upholstery and pillows for me.
Yeah, I think pillows, I was even thinking, you know, if you wanted to kind of give the illusion of, say, a wallpaper, something large scale like a screen or a tapestry, or even framed wallpaper panels
Right.
will give you that look. And if you buy something that's really great and you can keep carrying it from house to house, that's such a gift for so many years. But yeah, just go ahead and do the drapes too.
Guarantee we
Or-
have something.
or-
like
We're all
that.
giving you permission.
Upholstery
Okay, great.
headboard.
Yeah,
Upholstered
Upholstery
headboard.
headboards.
Yeah, that's a great
Yeah,
one.
that's a great one.
I'm sure I know all three of us have things we've carried from house to house.
Oh, yeah,
Years.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Because we
It's
buy
kind
what
of
we
nice
love.
too, because then when if you are someone that moves a lot, maybe you travel for work or something like that, then when you bring such a strong piece with you and you have people over, they're like, oh, this feels like you, which is such a nice compliment to
It
get when
is.
someone walks in your home. Okay, you guys are up. Any questions? Yeah.
This one.
So, some of the things that I love the most about your spaces is that they are so collected and personal. And I'm speaking of your houses and things that I've seen that you do. When you have a client who comes to you and says, I love your look, I love your spaces, but yet collections are personal, and they don't really know how to do that or don't have an interest in doing that. How do you advise that, or do you do the collecting for them as you go about the job?
We can.
But I think there's so many reproductions out there too that give you the look of something older.
But
mean,
without
that's
maybe the
always a-
commitment.
Or the cost.
Yeah.
You know, if they're just trying it on, you know what I mean? And, but I also really ask clients, you know, what do you like? Because there's so many things that vie for our attention. I think they like something because it's done well, but they may not like it because they really intuitively like
Right.
really like it. So I really try to get down to why you say you like it and do you really like it, and does that make sense? Because I can see something that I say, oh, I like that, but I don't want it for my house. Or, you know, I may think that I want it, but that's not, it's just really well done, you know, so.
And that's a part of our job is to bring
The
that
psychology part.
the psychology
Yeah.
part, but it is to bring it to the table. So if you have a client who he or she may have never known they love blue and white china, it happens to look great with so much, and so then they can it gives them a springboard to think, oh, because this is addicting what we do. I mean, let's face it, we could have horrible habits, but interior design's it's incurable. I mean, you can't do anything about it. But you install that in someone's house, and then all of a sudden it gives them something. Maybe I do like blue willow china, and it gives them something to look for and to expand upon. Some people they just want a backdrop. They want it to be pretty, and they will pay for the 50 plates that you find at an antique mall. And it comes down to a personality thing, really. But the folks who call us, and it's going back to that psychology, they couldn't make the decision themselves, and so you have to not only make the decision, but you have to under-promise and over-deliver in that sense. So when it's like, okay, well, 1 plate's good, 20's better. But we know, like, you see in our pictures and things, if I just put a lamp on a table, well, I have to put a shade on it, I have to plug it in, there's so much involved with each step. So you go that extra mile, and they appreciate it, and they maybe get inspired to start collecting.
Well, I think you said, someone asked you, what do you collect? And you said collections.
Yeah.
And I love collections too. But I have lots of clients who ask me the same question. Where do I start? I don't have anything. I was not given anything. So to their points, encouraging them to find what they are interested in collecting. But I mean, every project that we do, if we're doing a dining room, a kitchen, a breakfast room, I'll say, it would look so beautiful on this table, and kind of nudge them in the right direction as far as china. I did that with a client 2 days ago, and she said, this is brilliant. I said, Mother's Day is coming up. Tell your kids, your husband, and then they can kind of start building, and hopefully in 2 years, or even sooner, they'll have a collection that they loved. I always encourage, linens are a really inexpensive way to kind of make something feel more personal and layered. And there's so many inexpensive options out there, and adding a monogram is always going to elevate that look. So tabletop is a really easy way to kind of start that, to have your home kind of feel like it's been layered over time, even though you may have recently acquired all of these things. But one of my favorite things to do is incorporate antiques with fresh fabrics from Schumacher. So of course we have the best resource ever, Scott's here in Atlanta. So finding those pieces too, and there's always going to be a great dealer who has a whole set, and really 20 places, get the whole thing. And then you'll find a great spot, and then it looks like that kind of wow moment that you probably are admiring in shelter magazines and books. And so I think there's easy ways, but don't just buy it because you saw it and you, like Erika said, just thought it looked good. But there's so many great things to collect these days.
That was a great question.
Yeah, that was a really good question. Does anyone else have any questions
Y'all are
for
quiet.
our masters of the mix?
We were all wondering, we're like, what are they going to ask? And y'all are being, all being quiet.
Yes.
What percentage of your work is antiques, and are they getting harder to find?
They are, yeah. I don't know the number, like percentage-wise, but I can tell you just in the last 24 months, 3 years ago, we had clients like you couldn't give away brown furniture, and now to find a Beaufront chest is harder and harder to find. So much of it's cyclical, so much is, I don't like to be trendy, but there is a trend right now because of supply chains. So you can't get a new piece of furniture that's painted from overseas. Well, guess what? There's, some Eastlake tables at an antique mall, and you can lacquer them real quick. And so percentage-wise, for us, like when it comes down, like we love all of our upholstery predominantly to be new, tailored pieces, unless it's just, such good pieces like chairs or in particular, like a great ottoman that has a good shape. So I'd say at least 30% of the room is antiques or refurbished, but that number's creeping up these days.
Absolutely. I think too, it depends on the project too. So if it's a primary residence, I would say most of my clients already have a lot of antiques, but if it's a second home and they're kind of wanting that look, it's getting harder to procure those things, but I would much rather have something old. So it's worth the hunt.
Yeah.
Than going out and buying something a little bit more contemporary. But the mix too, I think, is very important. I think having something kind of more contemporary in each room is a way to keep it feeling a little bit fresh.
I'm sure all of our phones
And
are about to
everybody.
start. We'll see who turned their phones off. Yeah.
You mentioned it earlier, but when someone has a lot of art, really good art, it's so hard to find patterns that you can put with it.
Oh, hold on, we're getting you a mic. Sorry, you have to start over.
When someone has great art and a lot of art, and that's their passion, how do you find other things to put with it that don't clash with the art, since that's really the focal point?
That's a great question.
That's a great question. One of my degrees is in art history, so much of my time in college was spent in a museum. And think about a museum, there's abstract, there are classical landscapes, there's gaudy gold frames, then there's very simple or unframed canvases. But the common denominator through it all is that there's a texture, at least some kind of texture to the walls. Just a flat sheetrock just doesn't hold up. And so for our clients with extensive art collections, we have to think about what takes center stage. Is it that Picasso print, or is it the granddaughter's piece that she made in preschool, and that's really what's more special. So we have to find those pieces, but create and then curate. And so I always go to a museum as that inspiration. It's never just a flat wall. There's something to the walls of a museum, and it's usually some type of visual texture.
I think that question also brings up a really good point, to include your art when mixing patterns. That's a huge component of how it all comes
Don't let that be a surprise at the end.
Oh, yeah.
Because that's
Yeah.
typically the
Yeah.
catalyst for the design.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
And I
starts
think
with the
too,
art.
subject matter is so important. So if you have, say a collection of 50 pieces, but 20 of them are English landscapes, well, that can really make a great statement on a large wall in the living room or going up a stairwell. Maybe it's a collection of vintage paint by numbers that could look really fun in a study over a sofa. So I think too, that's a fun way to kind of approach how do we hang it, and do they each need to stand on their own, or is it fun to kind of see a grouping together? Of course, portraiture is harder. There's usually only a couple of spots to have your children's portraits or family heirloom pieces, and those need to be highlighted. Those need a picture light or a special place, but then maybe there's some really great spaces like a little kitchen wall that you didn't realize where you could do a little triple stack, and that looks great, or a butler's pantry. You know, all of those utilitarian spaces are great places to put artwork too, but I also include that in your schemes. If you have heavy, kind of darker colors, moodier colors, well then maybe let's talk about that up front and not do a full scheme that's pastel. You know, that could be hard to mix in together.
Okay, I think we have time for 1 or 2 more questions.
I have a mic. Okay. I'm going to admit I am not in shoes for this, so sorry, I'm going to be kind of loud.
That's impressive.
Thank you.
Okay, go.
Had to go to the low shoes.
So I have 2 questions, particularly for James. Are you going to be showing up for Farmdale Friday tomorrow morning?
I am. I'll have toothpicks under my eyes. We have an award ceremony tonight affiliated with ADAC, so we're honored to be nominated for that award. But my team and I are heading back after that so I can do Farmdale Fridays. Plus, my garden looks so good right now. I miss my foxgloves.
Yeah. And my next question is about bringing in what you find on the outside of the house and coming in and choosing patterns and fabrics that as you enter the home, it's an extension of what you might find outside. And is that something you consider, or is it just where you can transition easily when you don't do that?
I have a Schumacher. In fact, I can't remember who in the showroom was just helping me, but I have a outdoor Schumacher fabric. It's this brown and white Greek key that I've had on these 4 chairs for 10 years, and it still looks great, and I need more. And it's like, y'all, I need more. But it's been out there for 10 years. It's a Greek key, and it's brown and white. Those are 2 opposite color, and it looks good for so long. And that's outside, around my pool. And then there's pattern there with bluestone and brick, and there's pattern with boxwoods and hedges. So to me, the outside is just as important as the inside. I know whether we're telling a client what color to paint their shutter or what color their door should be, it doesn't stop. So you have to kind of take all that into consideration. Rarely are we interior designers. We're all over designer.
But I think about this space, like a sunroom. I tend to use a lot of green in sunrooms because I just want that room to feel like the extension of the outdoors. And especially when you have a whole bank of windows across the back, then it just really makes you feel like you're outside, but still inside. And then also, sometimes I've done a bedroom, it felt like we were in the treehouse, and I didn't necessarily do greens there, we did blues. And so again, just kind of like thinking about when that window's open and you're still lying in bed or you're getting ready or whatever, and just kind of having that, again, feel like a seamless, it looks seamless from the interior to the outside. Yeah. Or if you have a terrible view, like a brick wall, then we could cover that to a double layer of treatments, maybe.
And I think too, your approach can be a little peek as to what's inside. So if you have a pair of, say, beautiful Chippendale teak benches, and then maybe a pair of blue and white garden stools on either side of those, maybe that's just a little peek as to some other blue and white touches that are going to be, excuse me, inside, or a little chinoiserie pattern.
Yeah. No, it's
Those
true.
pillows,
It then leads in and all connects. Okay, probably one more question.
Last chance, come on.
A quiet bunch.
Going once, twice.
All right.
Okay, if you think of it, we'll be in the Schumacher showroom after this with some light bites. So please join us. And thank you so much for joining us today and for all of your great questions. It was so lovely having you join us, and thank you for sharing your expertise on mixing patterns.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, everyone.